To configure an OSPF virtual link, we use the command area and then the transit area followed by virtual link followed by a dotted decimal value. Now I say a dotted decimal value because you might think that that's just a physical IP address that happens to be on one of the far end routers. Well, it may be, but we have to know it better than that. That's too generic. I want to remind you of something that is really critical about OSPF, and that is routers are named in the world of OSPF. Now, I'm not talking about the router name which sets the prompt. I'm talking about that 32-bit numeric value that is written in dotted decimal, the router ID. We point to the far side of the tunnel, to the router on the far side of the tunnel that we're trying to build, and we specifically point to it with the router ID. This is important because OSPF will then say, what's the best way to get to that router ID? And it has the ability to do that because it's got all of the information about the transit area, looks at the OSPF link state database, runs Dijkstra's shortest path first algorithm, says, how do I get to that router ID? So how do we view the router ID? Do you remember how we view the router ID? Well, we view the router ID with the show IP protocols command. The show IP protocols command, or show IP OSPF, there are a lot of different ways of doing it. If you have to build an OSPF virtual link, you must be able to determine whether that be derivation by a mastery of the election process or by a show command. You must be able to figure out the router ID of the far side router, and then you point between the two routers that are the area border routers, and away you go. That is the way we configure an OSPF virtual link. So the things to remember, the area that we specify is the transit area, which is never area 0. And secondly, the dotted decimal value is not an IP address, it is the router ID. And that is an important distinction.